I need some traction.
Hey listeners, Lloyd Lobo here, co-founder at Traction and Boast AI. Super excited for today's session. It's with my good friend Ilya Brotzky, co-founder and CEO at Vanhack. And today we're going to talk about how they bootstrapped to nearly 8 figures in revenue by building a global community of 400 plus thousand developers. Ilya, welcome to Traction. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Thanks, Lloyd. It's super exciting to be here. I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm tuning in from Dubai, and I take it you're in beautiful Vancouver?
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver here at home. So we'll see how long I stay here. I like to move around every once in a while, but the last few years been here in Vancouver.
Fantastic. And Vanhack is one of the world's largest international tech recruiting platforms, and you've helped thousands of tech professionals get hired to date. You are a bright mind. You studied economics and marketing at Cornell. Geez, it was my dream in school to get into Cornell. And my dad would always say, I grew up in the Middle East, and the only thing we'd hear about is Cornell. And he's like, if you could only get into Cornell. Well, I never got into Cornell.
Oh, you're kidding. That's so funny. What a random school to have as a goal. Like it's usually Harvard and Princeton or Stanford or something.
I think all his friends, they got into Cornell, an Ivy League school, right? So, before founding Vanhack, you worked in mining, interesting background, and you created a crowdfunding app for the homeless. So I would love to dive into your backstory. And another interesting point between us is you went to school with one of the lead investors and board members at Boast, and coincidentally,
that's right.
You ended up being a reference point. So overall, you've been a great friend, a great community member, a great community leader. So excited to dive into your story today. How did you get into entrepreneurship?
Well, great question. And first off, let me just quickly say about Cornell. I snuck in on the swim team, so I wasn't one of those straight A students. I just got in because of swimming, so it was a very lucky journey. I can go into more detail later, but yeah. So I got into entrepreneurship, I think was when we moved to Canada when I was 5 years old. We basically, typical immigrant story, moved from Soviet Union, then to Israel, then to Canada when I was 5. We arrived with really nothing. I remember, we had to bring our first couch and off the street, we didn't have money for furniture. And I always, since then kind of knew what it's like not to have money. And then around that time, my parents got into multi-level marketing, Amway, these kind of companies. And since then, it's funny, I thinking about it now, it's like the original podcast. I used to listen to these tapes of people from Amway talking about how, don't have a job, you have to have your own business. And that's kind of the only way to be financially independent and free. And so that's really when the seed was planted for me. Of course, my parents, talked a lot about that as well. And I was always the kind of kid who had the lemonade stand. I remember starting a quote unquote recycling business when I was 5 years old, going door to door, asking people to recycle their bottles and pop cans, and returning them for 5-cent candies at 7-Eleven. And then, just doing different things like that. So I think from a young age, I was really interested in that idea of being my own boss.
Fantastic. And that is a quintessential immigrant story, right? A lot of immigrant entrepreneurs have humble beginnings like that. Introduce us to Vanhack. What made you start the company? In many ways, you're helping international founders become financially independent or get great jobs in many ways, right? So introduce us to Vanhack. What made you start the company?
So after I graduated from university, I did go work for a mining company in Brazil. And really soon after I kind of started, realized that it wasn't for me. It was the world's second largest mining company, huge company, 100,000 people. But what I did like was Brazil. And back in 2011, 2012, that was a booming economy. It was one of the BRIC countries. The Olympics and World Cup were coming up. And the startup scene was was burgeoning. So I decided to quit that job and go work for a nonprofit that did data collection in the slums of Rio, which was a really exciting kind of opportunity. But it was a volunteer gig. So I kind of was looking around for other things to do. And I got connected to kind of the YC or Techstars of Brazil. It was the first real accelerator there called 21212. 21 is the area code of Rio and 212 the area code of New York. So they're connecting Brazilian founders, entrepreneurs with American investors. And through a series of fortunate coincidences, I got connected to one of the startups there and ended up joining as a co-founder, went through the program, pitched at demo day. We raised money. It was all kind of going well. And until we, ran out of money and things didn't work out. So learned a lot of lessons there. But during that whole time, I was getting introduced to software developers that were in the accelerator who were curious about Canada. They were asking me questions about, either they or their friends or brother was interested in moving to Canada or getting hired in Canada. And then I kind of had that idea in my mind. So I threw up a website, threw up a Facebook page in Portuguese called Live in Canada, Morar no Canadá. And a bunch of people liked it. Like back when Facebook likes were a thing, I got, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 Facebook people liking the page in a few weeks. And that really kind of opened my eyes that, hey, there's this hunger that people have of relocating. And so when I came back home in 2014, actually moved back on Canada Day, July 1st, 2014, I decided to test this idea, and I would put up a really simple website asking people if they want to learn how to code, they can come and learn how to code. So I was doing like a lead generation for Lighthouse Labs and CodeCore and BrainStation, these kind of coding schools. But who ended up getting in touch with me were people who already knew how to code. They just needed help with the soft skills. So that's kind of how I learned about, through a lot of conversations, coffee, Skype calls, learned that the real pain point people had were the English, resume, things like that. And started an online school to teach developers English, which then morphed into a recruiting company that helps people get hired anywhere. So that's kind of the very simple backstory of how things started.
I love it, man. Everyone has a plan until you're punched in the face.
Yes.
So ship fast, ship often, and iterate along the way. And that's what you did. You put a Facebook page to test the demand and validate the idea. Then you put up a page to do lead gen. And what you really learned from that exercise is people actually want to work for Canadian companies and they need help with resumes and learning English. And then that more. Walk us through that journey a little bit, right? Because that was your initial idea was, hey, I'm going to do lead gen for coding schools. And that evolved into now one of the largest international tech recruiting platforms.
Yeah.
Walk us through that
sure.
early customer development. How did you make that pivot to let's teach English and let's help them with their resumes to then becoming a recruiting firm?
For sure. That's a really great question. I think first thing I'll say is that during basically the first year of Vanhack, I was working, actually a year and a half, I was working full-time in a job, and I was doing Vanhack as a side project. I think it's important to say that because a lot of people think that in order to start a business, they need to, go all in, quit their jobs and have a lot of money saved up, etc. The way I looked at it is if I could do, 1 hour a day or one thing a day to move my business forward, that would be, enough. Anyway, so early days, I really didn't take Vanhack seriously. I kind of had worked on a lot of different startups, like I mentioned, the one in Brazil and a few others that failed. And I was kind of in a pretty low point in my life where I didn't really have confidence that anything would work out. So I just kind of was trying things out, seeing what would work. And Vanhack for me was actually one of two ideas. The app for crowdfunding app for the homeless was the other idea I was working on. And Vanhack was one of those things that kind of just wouldn't let me go. Like I created this, like I was talking about the landing page. It was an unbalanced page that was full of Portuguese mistakes, and my Portuguese wasn't perfect at the time. And it was just focused on Brazilian engineers who wanted to come to Vancouver. So Vancouver, hackers coming to Vancouver, Vanhack. And so that early time, I just put up a website, put it in a bunch of different Facebook groups back again when Facebook groups were a thing. This is 2014, 2015. And people would just spread it, like sign up and like a bunch of people signed up through just the landing page. It was a very simple page that had email, like said, if you're interested, here's your name, put your name and email, like a simple landing page. I think like 50 or 60 people signed up in the first week, and I just emailed all of them and had calls with as many of them that would be open to talking to me. So it was just like very, hand-to-hand combat, one-on-one conversations, having back then Zoom wasn't big, so Skype calls. A few people were actually in town, so I would meet them for coffee, and it just try to learn as much as possible about what they wanted. I was first trying to sell the coding schools, right? Like I was saying, like, hey, maybe you want to come and learn how to code. And a lot of the people who wanted to learn how to code, they couldn't afford it because the Brazilian conversion rate from Brazilian currency to Canadian dollar was really bad. So and also they wouldn't be able to get a visa. But who ended up getting in touch with me mostly was people who, had 5 years experience, 10 years experience in software. They just didn't know how to do an English a resume in English, and they didn't have the confidence to speak English for a job interview. So I kind of, on and off the conversations. Again, I was working full time. It wasn't really something I took seriously, but I kind of over time started getting this feeling that, hey, that there might be something here. And even actually one example I would say is this one guy, Alexandre, he came to Vancouver and he was looking for a job. He was a developer with, I think, 10, 15 years experience, pretty senior guy. Him and I would meet once a week for about 7 or 8 weeks, about a couple months. He paid me $100 for my time, which was, if you do the math, lower than minimum wage. And we would sit there together and just do the resume practice over and over again, like an interview practice. And I just learned what people wanted and understood that, hey, like this is what it's going to look like. And over time realized that, what the course structure would be, the curriculum, et cetera. And people started buying the course. And that's kind of how the English school was launched. And then to move to the recruiting side of things, at first I started making intros between some friends of mine in the startup ecosystem, as well as and the developers in our platform, kind of to have success cases for students. How when you go to a university, you want to say like, hey, you come to Cornell and you're going to get hired at Goldman Sachs, like kind of quintessential like career, trying to have success case on the career side of things or the school side of things. And then I remember very vividly, I was at a Tech Vibes career fair. And Josh Nielsen from Eastside Games came up to me at the end and said, hey, how much does it cost to hire a developer from you? And I didn't really understand what he was saying, but then, because I didn't know you can actually get paid to make introductions to developers. I had no idea how recruiting worked. And so I made up a price. I think it was $500 was the first price. And then, we started off and started working together. And then that was kind of our first customer. And then we had a few others. Thinkific was the next one, Article, Care Team, a lot of these kind of local players here in the Vancouver ecosystem. And then I remember very vividly, we made our first placement for 15%. That was over $10,000 in revenue. And that was more money than we were making per month from the coding school. And it was frankly a lot less work because with the school, you had to do a lot of the kind of implementation and actual like delivery. Like I was teaching 8 hours of classes per week myself. And it was a lot of work. But with the recruiting side of things, you kind of, there's things involved, but you just make the intro and then check in and make sure everything goes smoothly. Of course, you have to make the right intro to the right person. That's the hard part. But I guess like that was really when my mind kind of lit up and said, hey, you know what, we should focus on the recruiting side of things. So I know that was a very long answer and a lot of detail, but hopefully that was very helpful for people.
That is very helpful because one key lesson here is in the early days, you got to do things that don't scale.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no substitute for talking to customers, your prospects, your ideal customer profile to understand a day in their life, like going to them and understanding what are they trying to solve or what are the aspirations, what are they trying to get to in life? What is the outcome they're looking for? And how are they getting that outcome today? What are they jangling together? And then how can you deliver the delighted state? Mm-hmm. And through that process of talking to customers and being where your customers eat, breathe, drink, sleep, you landed on a business model. And that is just amazing. But if you don't put yourself out there, you likely wouldn't land on it, right? Imagine you just built this website that automates resume creation. Mm-hmm. Or automates connection of developers to coding schools without validating it. Chances are it wouldn't have been a sensible business model that took you here, right? So I think that is a key lesson, and I'm glad you went deep on it. Did you have any milestones in the early days? Was there like a go, no-go time frame to drop this and work on another idea?
Yeah, I think for early days, I was just trying to pay my rent. That was kind of the original idea, just kind of original goal. I was working full time. I was working actually at Best Buy in the e-commerce department doing analytics and helping sell stoves and microwaves online, which was not something I was enjoying, but it was a job. And I wanted to, have enough money to pay my rent and Vancouver is with the rent prices here. And I remember very vividly one day we had our first ever webinar where we made like an offer at the end of the webinar to a candidate saying, hey, if you buy in the next 24 hours, you'll get a discount. And That night, my wife and I we were thinking about what we can do to save money. So we went to visit an apartment in like a not as nice apartment that we were living in. I think we were paying like $1,500 rent, and we were looking at a place for maybe $1,200 or $1,000. So it was significantly worse condo. And I remember leaving that visit, and my wife looking at me like, "Where I really don't want to live in this place." And I was kind of worried about like, what am I going to do to take care of us? And then I woke up the next morning, and we made I think $400 worth of sales and from the Vanhack course. And I was like, hey, like this is it's there's something here, it's working. And I think that was kind of the original goal, and we ended up kind of at the end of 2015 getting to a point where I was making more money from Vanhack than I was in my day job, and I actually quit my job on December 31st, 2015, and went full time 2016 as kind of and have been full time since then. But yeah, that kind of was the goal in the beginning, of just kind of trying to first pay my rent, and then second be able to work full time on my project or my company.
I love that. At least you had some benchmark, like, hey, my benchmark is, can I pay my rent and cover my expenses so I can go full time on it? That is conviction, man. I love it. At what point did you feel you had product market fit? You talked about how the journey went from like early validation to driving leads to helping them with resumes to then eventually becoming this recruiting platform for international developers. But at what point, I mean, getting one or two companies to say, hey, maybe I'll hire from you is one thing. At what point you feel like you had product market fit? This can be a thing. I'm going to go all in on this business model and stop pivoting.
Yeah, I think there's two moments. One on the candidate side in the course, we did a Black Friday sale the first year because I was working at Best Buy, and I was like, hey, let's do a they're doing a huge Black Friday sale, and then why don't we do the same? And I think we made more money. I don't know. We made a lot of sales, like more money in those 2-3 days of the Black Friday sale than all the rest of the history of the company before. And it wasn't that much money. I don't remember the number, maybe like $10,000 or $15,000. But that was just like, whoa, like there's people here that really want this course. They want to improve their English. They want to get hired abroad. They're willing to pay for it. And I guess people really like promotions. So that's kind of like a mini one. But the real one, I would say, is when we made 2 hires in one day. This was in the end of 2016. It took us quite a while to get our recruiting business going, especially because back, in 2016, there wasn't a global talent stream visa that would help people relocate to Canada. And our main market back then was Canada. And so it was really hard to find companies. Like we would, only work with 3 or 4 different companies. But then we made a hire in Germany, and then we made a hire in Waterloo in the same day. So a company called Newsletter to Go, which was an email marketing company that's got acquired now by Sendinblue. And anyway, they hired someone, and then the other day, Thalmic Labs, which eventually got acquired actually by Google, also made a hire in that same day. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I got like 2 emails within an hour of each other, and I think we made something like $15,000 or $20,000 that day. And I just was like I was just so happy that that was like, wow, I can't believe it. We made 2 hires in one day. And I think that's kind of really when it's not like I was really all in on Vanhack before that. But that really kind of was an exciting time where I could see like, hey, this could scale, this could become something pretty big.
What do you think was the tipping point that caused those hires to happen? Like, was it brand? Was it community? Was it a specific marketing channel? Like, how did that come about?
I think it was a combination of community and hustle, which I think kind of are similar, right? Like I think the big part of Vanhack is because we started as a school, we had this community feel to Vanhack since the beginning. We call our candidates and they call themselves Vanhackers. It's one of the reasons we haven't rebranded. Everyone's always like, why don't you change your name? It's like, well, now it's a van that helps move hackers anywhere. We transport tech talent. But more importantly, Vanhackers are, the kind of proud to be Vanhackers, and they have this kind of common fight together. They're all kind of fighting towards their goal of getting hired abroad. And for some people, it is really a life goal. Like for example, right now we've helped 21 people move from the Ukraine to Europe and Canada. And like, that's a huge life change. And we have a candidate, helping him move from Afghanistan to Canada right now. So it really is a huge problem that people are solving in their lives. So they have that common kind of struggle. And so that really creates the community aspect. So that's kind of really on the candidate side. On the employer side, I think it's just like networking, really. Like it's just getting intros, connecting to people. That's really, especially in recruiting, it's very much a reputation business. There's so many different players out there, and there's a lot of different solutions people can take. So how do they know that you're good? Especially early days, like no one really knew who we were at all. We ended up getting the company from Germany because we had gone to Germany and did Techstars. Like actually we had just gotten in, but we hadn't actually started the program. And it was like an intro from someone from Techstars that helped us get the company from Germany. And I don't even remember how we got Dalmic Labs. Maybe Communitech made an intro, or it's been so long, I don't remember how we got them as a customer. But yeah, it just networking and then hustling and trying to get the right referral into potential customers. So that kind of combination. Yeah, I think that a lot of hard work as well, right? Like early days of Vanhack, I would work probably 10-hour days easily, and weekends as well. These days, things are a little bit more calm, and I have some kids too, so a little more family balance. But early days of Vanhack, I think it's really important to stress that. Like, I think I would work till 9-10 p.m. every night, and many nights till 1 a.m. A few all-nighters and stuff like that. And I think that's really important to say, because these days people are kind of like balance, etc. But early days, you have to be really dedicated and hustling as much as possible.
You got to sprint a little bit to earn the right to run a marathon. That's why I look at it. If you sprint forever, you're going to burn out and die. But as founders, you need to know when you sprint, right? And you call that hustle, you call that fury, right? And then eventually there comes a time where you go from being this individual contributor doing everything yourself to then becoming a manager, managing individual contributors, to being a VP, and then being an exec. And you switch from being sprinting to running a marathon. So you build a sustainable business, and it feels like you've made that switch to being in a marathon for the long haul, greatly or very well. And you gotta sprint in the early days. I mean, I remember us at Boast. I was going to every event, right? It was how do I be? I sell to founder CEOs at technology companies. How do I be visible and credible in those circles? And showing up at every event, understanding where our audience eats, breathes, drinks, and sleeps, and networking with those people, and showing up there and getting the name out there, and then building community around that was a 24/7 hustle or sprint in the early days, first couple of years. And then you had teams to take over those functions. So that's phenomenal. How do you define hustle? Is it trying many things? Is it trying many things to figure out what sticks, or doing one thing consistently well, or is it a combination?
I think it's a combination, right? Like, because first you need to figure out what works. Then once you figure out what works, you really have to double down on that. So, I think, for example, with us in the early days of Vanhack, we tried different business models, right? Try like I mentioned earlier in the call, like this, we tried this model and that model and that model, and kept evolving and always listening to customers and understanding what they wanted. But then once we found like what works is, hey, we can connect these great candidates to employers. We just need to figure out how to scale that. So how do we do that thing over and over and over and over again? And we in Vanhack, for us, the main metric that matters is number of hires that happen. So you can see here 1,500 live change is actually closer now to 1,830. So that number keeps going up, and we're always tracking that number. We're getting ready to make our 2,000th hire. So really getting ready for that kind of celebration internally and also externally, and making some noise about it. So yeah, I think it's just relentless focus after something works and trying to figure out how to optimize it. Like early days of Vanhack, I was making email intros and our interview pipeline, like where we manage all the interviews that were happening, which is in a Google Sheet. Now we have a pretty sophisticated software platform and a lot of kind of automation and integrations with different products. So really early days was just kind of getting things done, like you were saying, doing things that don't scale. And then once you figure out what works, is like, how do you really take that to the, not next level, but like 100x, right? So how do we get, we're going to do 2,000 hires. How do we get to, 20,000 hires, or I guess 200,000 hires? And just keep, we found oil, and how do we just keep drilling and making that oil well bigger, or whatever metaphor you want to use.
Yeah. How do you drill it better, faster?
Exactly.
Right? And in many ways, a lot of the companies had their roots in things like this, right? If you look at AngelList, or you look at Product Hunt, which was a newsletter, right? And so those things matter a lot, right? I think AngelList started as like, hey, emailing a bunch of people deal flow, and that transformed into AngelList. And similar story, right? You got to do things manually because it helps you understand how to get customers to an outcome. Customers want an outcome. They don't want a piece of software. They don't want technology. They're signing up for an outcome. And doing things manually helps you understand what can I do to get them to that outcome. And then the technology enablement is like, how can I now get them that outcome fast? And the great thing is, as a part of that process, you figure out the one key metric, the North Star metric that matters. And with yours, it's lives changed or hires made. I think that is really key, right? And then you look at the leading indicators of that so you know, like what needs to happen to make those
exactly
to get the companies to make those hires, kind of thing. That's amazing. So, moving from the early days and post product market fit, you've managed to build this massive community of 400,000 devs. And you've been building community long before it was cool, right? I think you and I have been building community long before it was cool.
The OGs.
Community is, we're OG community builders. And community is like the flavor of the year. Everyone's talking about community-led growth. So let's dive into that a little bit. How did you get into community building?
It's funny. I think it's just always something that came naturally to me. I always liked kind of bringing people together. I led a trip to go to Mount Kilimanjaro with a group of 15 students in my senior year of university. I was on the swim team and was kind of captain of the swim team a few years when I was in high school. I just really liked kind of being a leader, and then also like just getting people together and doing fun, cool stuff that you wouldn't be able to do on our own. Like I wouldn't be able to go to Kilimanjaro by myself. I need to have that group of people with me, etc. So that was it. And I also really like ed tech. Like I when I was in Brazil, I was working in education technology companies. I really like that idea of democratizing knowledge, as well as creating something once and having it be consumed an infinite amount of times. So that I thought that was really cool. So kind of combining those two things and creating that online school feel. I'm also pretty addicted to social media. For anyone who follows me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook back in the day, I'm pretty active there. And so just having that kind of constant interaction with my community is really fulfilling for me. Like I get energy from it and something I really enjoy doing. So, we started off our first kind of community of Vanhack was a Facebook Messenger group. And then we moved to a WhatsApp group, which then, we maxed out the number of users. And then we went to Slack, and that's where we currently are. And we might move to something else in the future for where we host our candidates or community. But then, there was days back in the, 2015, 2016, 17 of Vanhack where I would spend the whole day just talking to candidates or Vanhackers, like all day. That's all I would do, just chatting with people, answering their questions, learning what they want to do, and kind of having that one-on-one interaction that then turned into something, bigger. And now we have community manager and stuff, and people kind of talk amongst themselves. But yeah, I don't know. I found it fun, and you're right. It is kind of hot right now. And it's also kind of a moat for us, where people, they after they get hired through Vanhack, they tell their friends, and they're proud to be Vanhackers, and it's something that they really helps us with referrals and growth. So yeah, I think it's a really important part of our business model, and it's not something I thought of early on. I just kind of thought, hey, we're like all learning together, so we might as well learn from each other, because that way I can kind of not have to be the only one who's sharing knowledge. It kind of worked out that way now that we just hit 400,000 members on the Vanhack platform, and we have a Slack group with about 80,000 people who have joined the Slack group, and we're always kind of sharing case studies, success stories. It's actually one of my favorite things is people watch our success cases as when they join Vanhack, and they're kind of a lot of times now in the success cases they say, oh, I watched like 10 of these success case videos and I wanted to be in one myself. So it's really cool to have that kind of goal that people have, is to get hired on Vanhack and share their story, kind of like their Oscar speech.
That's amazing. I can hear and feel the emotion and passion in your voice, right? And I was recently listening to a session by Dharmesh, the CTO and co-founder at HubSpot. He talked about, the way to build something successful is look at the concentric circles around your passions and skills. So your passion is building community, bringing people together, connecting people, but then you also are passionate and about ed tech. And so the combination of the two has created this massive community and a very successful business. So kudos to you for that. Community is becoming cool this year because, you know, people are trying to warming up to the reality that it is truly a sustainable moat, right? A community is a sustainable moat. You own the relationship. And I have this belief that if you fall in love with your customer and make them successful beyond your product or service, if you build that community, you won't become a commodity. Always yesterday's innovation becomes today's sort of option and tomorrow's commodity, right? But if you have the community, if you build that community and you're helping them become successful, they're rooting for your success in many ways. And it's that flywheel of let's keep everyone together. And if you look at it in many ways, Harley Davidson almost went bankrupt in the 80s. They rebuilt the company on the ethos of community. HubSpot, Gainsight, those categories of customer success and inbound marketing didn't exist. They built that around, hey, we want to make people better digital marketers. We want to make customer service more proactive. It's too reactive. And they created a community around customer success, around inbound marketing. And they created multi-billion-dollar companies, created giant categories. So I think that's a big reason it's becoming hot. But like you've been building it, OG, 400,000 developers. What is a community? Define that for us, right? Because a lot of people say they have a community, but it's an audience. Community versus audience, what's the difference? I think you guys have a true community when you got members engaging on the platform there. But walk us through that journey, right? Audience versus community.
That's a really good question. I never really thought about those kind of two distinctions, but I think you hit the nail there where you said engagement. I think audience, it's a one-way communication, right? Like you watch a movie, you go to the movie theater. It's not like you're talking to Tom Cruise when you watch Top Gun, right? Like he's not many people are, for example. But in community, you have that accessibility where the audience or the community talks to each other, as well as people who are creating the content, kind of the community leaders, and that could be a number of different folks, right? Not just one person. They're also interacting, right? So they're in that I guess whatever platform you use, whether that is Slack like us or something else, and of course Discord right now with Web3 is huge too. You're having that interaction, that two-way dialogue, or even three-way dialogue, where it's the community amongst each other plus you as well. So it's kind of a 3D dialogue where there's always kind of and I also think it's important to kind of community is somewhere like where someone goes because they expect to get a reply, right? They're going to go there, they're going to post something, and they're going to engage with it because they know that they're going to get someone there is going to get them what they're looking for, answer their question or a tip or whatever it might be. So I think that's also really important to say. That'd be my distinction.
Fantastic. Now, walk us through, if you had to start a community from scratch or when you started this community, how did you get started? Getting early members to seed it in the beginning, then getting members to come together and then keep coming back together is a challenge, right? How did you do that?
I think, again, just a lot of hard work, like talking. First off, I think you need to know what the common pain point that everyone has. Like everyone needs to have a common problem that they're trying to solve. Like what is they trying to do? For example, the traction community, it's everyone's trying to get more traction and we're trying to grow faster and improve their business. With Vanhack, it was candidates were looking to get hired abroad, and for a lot of them, this was a really hard challenge because English wasn't there. They weren't confident. They didn't have the right skills, or they just didn't know where to even look, which companies were open to hiring from abroad. So if we were able to create content, whether that's blog posts or podcasts, early days, it's funny. I had this podcast called the Bike Podcast. I'd bike around Vancouver and just talk to people about what it's like, hey, I'm biking down Burrard Street and I'm doing, and let's talk about the top 10 startup accelerators in Canada, or the top skills that you need to get hired in Canada, like Python or JavaScript or whatever. And actually I was riding my bike and people could hear me breathing hard and stuff. And people really like that. Maybe I'll bring it back. It's also fun doing a podcast when you're biking. anyway, it's like things like that where it's engaging. I would also use Periscope and kind of show people. We would have like a virtual conferences. Brazil Canada Connect was our first virtual conference where we interviewed a bunch of Canadian, entrepreneurs and product leaders and CTOs and people who are hiring, and asked them what they're looking for. So things like that really helped a lot to build a community early days. And yeah, just having a lot of one-on-one discussions and DM, having a lot of discussions like on the main channel, just showing people, like answering questions, webinars, tons of content. So yeah, I look at Vanhack as a media company. I think we really share this same ethos with, Traction and Boast, where it's a media company helping people solve problems, and then the kind of revenue is kind of, it comes from that afterwards.
So, you got those people early days through, just interacting with them, bringing them together, sharing content, sharing valuable content that they could get meaning in their life from, they could further their careers from, entertaining them, connecting them through content and relationship building and events and really community. How did you get the members to keep coming back and bring their friends? Because that's what drove this to become 400,000 people and 80,000 people on Slack. What were some key things you did there?
I mean, I think first and foremost, delivering on our promise, right? Like, a lot of people thought Vanhack was a scam. Or actually, it's funny. Shashir, one of the guys who got hired at Boast, he told me at the Traction conference last week that he thought Vanhack was a scam when he first heard about it, and a lot of people don't really believe it. Sounds too good to be true. So if we deliver on the promise and actually have real life success cases and people get hired and stories and showing videos of people hired or pictures of people arriving at the airport and actually proving to our community that what Vanhack is preaching, if you follow these steps, then you will get, of course, not everyone, but their chances are pretty good that you're going to get what you're looking for. So really just adding that value and actually delivering and creating results is, I think, what gets people to come back and believe in Vanhack as something that will get them what they want and tell their friends about it, and continue to refer. Word of mouth is still our number one channel of how people hear about Vanhack, and I think I'm really proud of that because it's hard to get developers to trust something. I think especially developers are a little bit more skeptical. So yeah, I think that's really the most important thing. Is like if you don't do that, then nothing else matters. So you really have to deliver on your promise. Definitely.
Now, are there key metrics you measure when it comes to the community? Because you talked about the outcome for your customers, which is the number of people hired or lives changed. And you talked about the leading indicators to that. But in many ways, your community and the interactions between those community members is the earliest leading indicators of engagement that leads to referrals, like you talked about, right? So what are some things you measure there? How do you engineer communication between members and referrals? Like, is there some specific things you did to be deliberate in engineering those?
I think, yeah, just posting regularly. Like we would post questions or have webinars or kind of have kind of some interaction at least every week, but usually 2, 3, 4 times a week. Being there to answer any question really quickly. So if someone posts a question, like there's a comment answer from someone on our team really quickly, so people see that there's like someone there and this is a live, real community. We also have a referral program where if someone refers, Vanhack, they get $500 when the person gets hired. So that helps as well. But I think really just like kind of being active and being present and always being there. Of course, it's hard, right? Like a lot of time, early days on my phone, I would be on my phone all the time. Just like we were at a grocery store, my wife was doing the groceries, and I was on my phone talking to a Vanhacker on Slack and things like that. So that it is a lot of hard work in the beginning, and it's still hard work now. But especially to kind of get things going, you really have to show that there's life here and there's movement here. And so the worst thing you go to join a Slack group and like it's dead, right? And then that's game over. So you really want to have that feeling of activity, movement, and I think that really helps create that comfort level for people to post and ask questions and engage.
Definitely. I think one of the great things here is you're a community manager or a community leader at heart, right? And so your soul can't rest in peace if there's a question and it goes unanswered for seconds, right? You can't have crickets going and then people leave, right? Like it's like I came for something and I didn't get that outcome. and so I'm going to leave, because
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
chances are of that experience repeating, like the first impression is
Yes.
a lasting, and the last impression, if I come there, I show up and there's nobody there, I'm going to leave, right? So that onboarding is really key. That aha moment, that first experience of delight is really key. And when you get this dialogue going between people, you're answering them, it's in a way saying, I'm showing up consistently. I'm showing up for you people. And that showing up consistently and that consistency
Mm-hmm.
builds trust. And that
Mm-hmm.
thing done consistently over time leads to a large outcome, right? Success. A lot of people look for silver bullets for success, but what is it really? It's one or two things done consistently well over time.
That's
And when
right.
it comes at communities, it's showing up. Like you see an answer, you see a question, somebody is answering that within split seconds, or people want a connection made, you make that happen in split seconds or minutes, so they don't have to wait. And they're like, wow, this is a great experience. I'm going to recommend other people to this Vanhack community. Those community members, and some become clients, some become developers that you help get recruited. And the
Mm-hmm.
cycle keeps going and going. I love it. I love it. We can go on and on community for hours here, just how you've built this. Fantastic. Well, let's switch gears to building teams, right? You bootstrap the company. You, from doing this yourself, answering Slack messages and making connections happen and taking calls while doing groceries, to probably, waking up in the middle of the night because you're dealing with developers all over the world, to now
Mm-hmm.
having a sizable team, nearly 8 figures. How did you build your team? Like, what is the order of key hires, maybe from your early bootstrap stage to generating millions in revenue? Who do you hire, when, and why?
Yeah, that's a very actually $1 million question, because if you can get this wrong, it's costly, and if you get it right, it's very rewarding. And I definitely got it wrong a lot. It's funny, it's kind of ironic how a recruiting company, or a company that helps you hire people, was so bad at hiring in the early days. This was really kind of my first and successful startup. I've had some other companies that I've worked on, but this one really is the one that kind of scaled and grew. So I didn't really know what I was doing in early days. I just would kind of say, hey, you want to work at Vanhack? You have a pulse? Okay, you're hired. Like, that was literally our interview process. So we made a lot of bad hires in the beginning. But we did make two fantastic hires in the beginning as well. Julia and Thiago, who are our two first hires, and are still with us 7 years later. Thiago was our first kind of community manager, actually, and then he became he was a Van Hacker as himself, and then he became our first developer hire, and now he's our CTO. So I think, if you're a tech company, having somewhere on the tech side is critical, right? So having that kind of, doesn't have to be a CTO in the beginning. I think a lot of people, actually, this kind of maybe some advice, is a lot of people put this pedestal that they need to find a technical co-founder, like people like me who are in the sales, marketing, non-technical side of the business. They think that, hey, if I don't find a CTO or a non-technical co-founder, my business is done. I totally disagree. There's so many things you can do with no code, low code tools these days that you don't really need that. But if you can hire someone who can grow into a CTO role over time, as you grow with them, trust that person, and etc., I think that's really key. So having someone on the tech side is super critical. And then Julia was more on the operations side. So she's probably the most organized person I've ever met. Very data driven, always has a report or spreadsheet that she's looking at, and is just like super detailed, and understands the kind of process side of the business. So she's been really great hire on that side, and she's leading our candidate success team. So those two are really key hires. Another really key hire to make is HR. So this is a hire I wish we made earlier, but since we made this hire, so someone who can help take care of all the contracts, making sure, vacation policies, when people have problems or kind of issues, let's say with their manager or with someone else on the team, they can go to her. And as you scale, that those problems just get exponentially larger. So just having someone on the people operation and talent acquisition side of things is super important, helping with employer branding, Glassdoor, posting jobs, first round interview, all those things. Those are really key hires. I mean, I'm just going to go through my whole executive team here. I'll say one more because I can go on and on. But we hired a head of sales pretty late. I wish we had hired a head of sales, head of growth earlier than we did. We hired someone 5 years in. Actually, it's funny. It's a hire we've been trying to make and made the wrong hire a few times. But when we hired Megan, who's going to be on our team about coming up to 2 years now, that really helped build out, because I was leading the sales team, back then, and we tried to hire people or promote from within, and never really worked. But once we found the right person on the growth side of things and the employer side, B2B sales, that really helped kind of unlock the growth on that side of the business. And yeah, there's other people, and I kind of feel bad not mentioning everyone on our exec team, but I think just the general idea, maybe I'll close with this, is once you found product market fit, and Jason Lemkin, who I know you are a big fan of, with SaaStr, and you collaborate with him a lot, and he has this really great talk about once you hit $1 million in ARR, your goal is to get to 10 million in ARR as fast as possible, and how you do that is by hiring an executive team as fast as possible. And I think that really helped kind of unlock, like, not everyone is reporting to me. We have created teams. I have maybe 6 or 7 direct reports, and then we have other people kind of working on teams with those people, with the direct reports to me. That really was a hard transition. It took maybe a year or two to make that transition. And a lot of mistakes, like I mentioned, hiring the wrong people to be team leads. But once we have that in place, and kind of having that idea of like the leadership team is the core team, like the first team, and then it's like, for example, if you're the head of sales, your core team is not the sales team. Your core team is the head of like all the other leaders, right? So that kind of concept, having weekly meetings with that team, was something that really helped us kind of get the whole company on the same page and scale to around 100 people from, we were around 30 a couple of years ago. So, that was really, really important. And so I think kind of that hiring progression is something that I made a lot of mistakes with, and I think hopefully people can learn from those, and try and kind of extract yourself from those key functionalities. You should not be managing teams after you hit product market fit. Like, you should have other people who are managing those teams, and that'll really help you scale a lot faster.
Definitely. Now, what were the key traits you uncovered of hiring a great sales leader? Because you had a few bad experiences. What made you realize that this is the one?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Probably what happened with other people who you kind of forced the best salesperson to be the team lead. I think that we made that mistake a few times, where we had like a really good salesperson on the team, and we thought, okay, this person, let's promote them to the lead. And being a really good salesperson is not the same as being a really good sales manager. Actually, sometimes they're complete opposites, although sales managers are really good salespeople as well. So when we hired the right person, there was definitely obvious that she knew what she was doing in terms of being able to be a player and a coach at the same time. And that's a really fine balance, and hard to do, because you can't be too much of a player and just be a salesperson, and you can't be too much of a coach and not actually know how the customer thinks and be able to do demos and be able to solve problems and get on customer calls yourself. You can't just be like, hey, like, I'm going to just sit back and let everyone else do the work. You need to be involved and get your hands dirty as well. So I think when we found someone that had that right balance, that was really helpful, and that person could be a leader and lead by example, and also teach me and help me, because I'm always trying to learn myself too. So yeah, that was like the main kind of key. And I think for different companies, different stages, there's a different solution, a different person. But I think, like, if I could go back and give myself advice, maybe, let's say 2016, 2017, earlier days of the company, I would say, just focus a lot more on trying to find that person as soon as possible, because then you can go from a sales team of, let's say, 5 people or 6 people, because that's how many I can manage, plus the whole other leadership team, to a sales team of 15, 20, 30, 40, or infinite number of people, because you can build a structure with that person in place. So yeah, that's kind of the way that I found, and also, like, you can also look, very sales is very black and white, right? You'd see the numbers, like, are we getting new customers? Are those customers converting? Is it working? So that kind of helps with sales as a very 1 or 0 business or department.
I love this journey, because your hiring journey is an insight into how community-led businesses should be run or grow, right? Started with a founder who's really your title is CEO, and it should be CEO and Chief Community Officer, really, right? Like, you're a relationship builder at heart. You're the heart of the community. You built the community. you can't sell to that community because you lose that trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you start hard selling into the community that you've been managing as sort of a broker of resources,
Mm-hmm.
a messiah of hope and help to them, to connect them. Now you go and sell them, it dirties the relationship. So, you were the community manager, everything coming to word of mouth, but word of mouth still needs to be nurtured by sales eventually. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
you did learn that, made that key hire later, or took longer to make that key hire than necessary. But nonetheless, you're the community manager, the connector who understands the heart and soul of this community. You're enabling them, you're helping them. You got an operations person to make sure everything is running, and you got a technology person to expedite the enablement of that community. And then
Mm-hmm.
you hire the salesperson who takes the referrals and sort of like, I shouldn't say good cop, bad cop, but you keep being the evangelist and the messiah of hope to this community to get them that outcome. And then you got the sales team that is taking the goodness that you're creating
Mm-hmm.
and turning that into revenue. So I like that parallel motion of community and going into the sales funnel, right? It
Yeah.
can't be like a lot of companies. What they do is they do this community and this stuff, and they help, but it never generates revenue. But when
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
combined, you got the community flywheel
Mm-hmm.
in connected with the sales funnel,
Mm-hmm.
then magic happens, and you've retained that magic and grown it. Amazing. Now you bootstrapped the company. How did you fund your business without giving up much equity?
Mm-hmm.
How have you done that? I'd love to get some insight on it.
For sure. I think first off, we did raise a little bit of money. So we raised 20K early days from an angel investor, and then we did Techstars, which is another about 120, 130K. So there was some.
No money. That's little to no money.
Yeah. I mean, back then it was a lot of money, right? Like I was making 30K at my job, so getting a 20K check was exciting. Back in 2015. That for sure, looking back, you see these companies now raising $5 million, like without even having any revenue or customers or anything. So yeah, I do think that we did raise a significant little bit amount of money compared to the revenue that we're making for sure. We also did a few startup programs that I highly recommend people check out. They're equity-free startup programs where you get money from different governments around the world for no equity, just in exchange for going to that country, living there, and being part of the ecosystem. So we did Startup Chile, which was the first program that we did, and that got us 40K Canadian dollars equity-free. We spent 6 months in Chile. It was a lot of fun, a lot of mentorship connections. I got a few customers from that as well, and actually got connected to Techstars Berlin through Startup Chile. And then after we did Techstars Berlin, we did another startup accelerator that was equity free in Luxembourg called Fit for Start. And this program is awesome. It's 150K euros equity free. There's some bureaucracy, of course, involved in it, but that also kind of obviously, like, that money doesn't just lie on the floor. So it's a pretty good program as well. And also, like, in nature of our business, it helped us get connections into different markets and customers that way. So also it was a lot of fun, moving with my wife and co-founder to South America, and then we lived in Germany, and then we lived in Luxembourg and a bunch of other places in Europe too. So that was a big part of our funding early days. Another thing I think we did, is we hired globally from the beginning. So when you hire a distributed team globally, it's very different than having like 15 people in San Francisco. Salary is just naturally a little bit lower. So we're able to move faster and hire people from all over the world, find great talent quicker, and be more cost effective with those hires as well. So that was one of the reasons why we were able to bootstrap. I will say though, like, we're definitely not close to fundraising. Like, honestly, the reason we haven't raised money, especially early days, is because no one would invest. They all thought this was a lifestyle business, or like it wouldn't scale. This is just like a recruiting agency, and they didn't really believe in the vision that we had, and had a lot of rejection from investors. And just giving one anecdote after graduating from Techstars Berlin, you do the demo day, you meet with investors, you kind of have that accelerator forcing function of trying to raise money afterwards. And we tried to raise €500,000. We were in Europe, so everything was in euros. And we just fell flat on our face. Like, no one would invest. They gave those reasons I talked about. And then the last 3 months of 2017, we made more than €500,000 in revenue. So I just realized, like, hey, customers want to give us money, and they don't take equity, and they're happy to hire people from us. And it's funny, recruiting is one of those businesses where if companies don't pay you, they get upset because it means that you didn't fulfill your goal, like you didn't fill the job. So it really, I guess for us, it's a little bit different. Like we're not building a hardware, company or a social network or something like that where you need huge amounts of scale to be able to monetize, or like invest a lot of money in R&D to be able to monetize later. So I think that also helps kind of us continue the bootstrapping journey. But yeah, if there's any investor listening to this, I'm definitely open to chat. Like we're not against investment and growth. So would love to have a conversation if anyone wants to come on the journey with us.
Definitely, man. I think what you built is a great business that is centered and powered by community, that is getting the love and attention from the CEO. People are getting an outcome. You're changing lives. And that's a moat in itself that people can't replicate. 400,000 developers building a community of that are getting outcomes that are engaging with each other is hard to replicate. What I'm more curious about is, what are some learnings from building a company with your wife?
Yeah. Well, I think the big thing there is understanding the boundaries, right? You have kind of your personal life and your professional life, and how do we distinguish between those two, and when we have kind of work time and not work time or personal time. Of course, those are oftentimes blurred, but it's really important to kind of not talk about work at dinner or after 5 p.m. or 9 or 6 p.m. or whatever. Don't worry about that. Right now, we're a little bit in parenting mode. We have 2 young kids, a 2-year-old and a 22-day-old, so or 23-day-old. So there's a lot more focus on personal life and family these days. But I think the benefit of it, though, is that there's someone on your team who you can trust more than anything, right? Like if you can't trust your life partner, your wife or your spouse or husband, whatever, then you have bigger problems than just a startup, right? And I remember someone telling me, actually Alexandra from Care Team, a really great entrepreneur and one of our first customers, she gave me this really great piece of advice that I still remember to this day. She said, you can have multiple startups, but usually, you only have one spouse, or at least that's the goal, right? So at the end of the day, you still have to, I think even if we have differences, and I guess like what I'm trying to say is that she can call me out on my BS better than anyone else can. And finding a business partner that you can kind of go through the stresses of life and trust more than anyone is super valuable. So I think that's really important. And then the last thing I'll say is that her intuition is way better than mine. I'm very much, or at least used to be even more like this. And these days I've kind of smartened up a little bit. But I used to remember how I said, if anyone wants to work at Vanhack, they can join. I used to be very trusting, very open. Anyone want to know anything about Vanhack, I would tell them, etc. And got burned a few times through that. So and she was always kind of like, hey, you know what, I don't think this person really has your best interest at heart, and kind of would always give me a heads up. And then I would always say, oh no, I don't think you're wrong. And then at the end of the day, she was right, and I had to like 4 times. So yeah, I think having that kind of person who can call you on your BS and kind of say, hey, you know what, like this is the cold hard truth, and I can tell you this when maybe someone else can't, is really valuable. And I think that's something that's really helped us, because yes, it's a really emotional roller coaster, right? Doing a startup, there's a lot of highs and a lot of lows, and having someone in your corner, that is at that kind of connection level, I think has been really helpful. So yeah, that's what it's been like.
Definitely. I often say my co-founder at Boast, Alex, and I have known each other since college, and we did a bunch of things together. He's even with me in Traction, and then we did Boast. And my wife often says that I may not start a company with you, but Alex and you are like husband and wife, right? I moved to Dubai recently, and he did move to Dubai as well with his family. But there's one thing that's I want to draw out, that you said, I'm too trusting. I think you and I connect on one thing, right? We start people here. We don't start people here, because it's very hard to start people at different levels, because our brains, especially people in community, we can't just start judging people. You can't be a community leader or community builder and say, I'm going to judge this people at this level or this person at this other level. You automatically start everyone here. And so you got to just assume
Yeah.
right? Like a community, like you're basically, your relationships are a portfolio, and you're like, you know what, 80-90% of these people are going to work out. The 10% of the time,
Yeah.
if people are going to take advantage of me, then that's bad on them, not on me. But like the 90% of the goodwill you create from doing that, and the stress you reduce by not trying to have different benchmarks or different people, really makes community building a superpower for you. I want to close off.
Just sorry, Lloyd. Just I want to push back a little bit, because I think you can do that, but at the same time, you can kind of see the signs. You know, like you can see when someone maybe like. I gave a whole can I swear, a fuck up night talk about this. If people want to Google that, about some, you know, we had an example where someone I was way too trusting with actually ended up cloning the business, stealing money from us. It was a whole stressful thing. So I think there's a limit, but I totally agree with you. You have to start with trust, lead with that. And then, you know, if people want to abuse it, just understand earlier on when that's happening, and then kind of cut the relationship or sever ties sooner rather than later. So yeah, I think you're right. But just having that spidey sense a little bit more sharp, I think will save people some headaches.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that. I'm just saying, like, you know, when you're building community at scale, you got to start everyone at a level at the top. But then you need to make sure where you draw the boundaries.
Yeah.
And you know, how you have that spidey sense around like trust, right? Because you got to, you know, if you overshare with some people, not everyone has your best interest. So identifying that itself, but you learn with time. You make a lot of mistakes. I've failed around that, right? Before it was Traction, it was another community, and we had a partner who ran off with all the money and ran off with the assets, and it was a devastating nightmare, because it's draining when people do that to you, right? Run away with the thing. In many ways, we have very, very similar stories. I want to close off with something you started with, right? You talked about, you know, I was at a low point in my life, things weren't working out. How did you navigate that low point? Because, you know, being a founder is very hard. There's highs and lows. One minute you're crushing it, then somebody runs off with your assets or steals your business. Another minute your you know, revenues are high, then a big customer churns. Then things are on the up and up, and you're doubling growth, and then you have personal setbacks. Any tips for navigating the highs and lows of this journey? Because you've hit those points.
Yeah. I mean, going through them now, or even like with the downturn right now, it's definitely stressful times as well. I think the couple things. First off, there's a really good book called The Power of Now that I read a few years ago, and I keep rereading all the time, and just kind of been thinking about that. There's a really good Flaming Lips song called All You Have Is Now that I also kind of sing to myself in my head sometimes. And that kind of staying in the moment mindset of just being present, and the future is never as good or as bad as you think it is. And if you can be in the moment more, I feel like that really helps kind of that brain, where you just to start creating negative situations and anxieties and worries. I'm a huge worrier myself. Like I remember when I was a kid, I had to like take like special counseling because I was worrying too much when I was 5 years old. So it's been something that's been an issue for me for a while. And I think having that kind of stress, not stress, but that kind of mindset of just being in this moment, like I'm just recording a podcast right now. Don't worry about the future too much, because as an entrepreneur you can really get in your head of like, okay, I want to be here in 6 months, and then in 1 year, and then in 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. And it's good to have those goals, and of course I set goals as well, but staying in the moment is really, really helpful. So check out that book, The Power of Now. And then another thing is having that right support network around you. So, I have my family, of course, my wife, some, core group of really good friends, and having that support network to kind of rely on is really helpful. And just be able to talk to them and kind of have that almost group therapy, I think is super important. I'm just about to join a group called the Entrepreneur Organization. I've heard really good things about EEO. I'm in some Slack groups as well with Canadian entrepreneurs, and go to coffees and meetups, and I think that really helps. And then last thing I think is exercise. That's also really important. Is kind of going for a run or finding whatever you like to do as exercise. That really helps me as well. Like I love going swimming, and I grew up swimming competitively. Like I mentioned, that's how I got into Cornell. So every time I'm stressed, I like to go for a swim, and that usually helps calm me down. So yeah, the combination of those things, and I think okay, one more thing is just being grateful. Yeah, we are on these journeys, and there's a lot of stress, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. Like my wife often says, when I'm complaining or down about something, it's like, well, hey, would you rather be back, in the Best Buy days when you were commuting an hour on the SkyTrain to Burnaby and having that stress? Like, do you want to be back there, or do you want to be here where you are now? And the answer is always, where I am now, even though there's challenges, stressful. So yeah, those are the things I would say. But hey, it's really hard. Like I definitely don't have it all figured out. A lot of stress, especially like I mentioned right now, there's like the economic downturn. We went from everyone was hiring developers like crazy, couldn't find enough, to everyone was laying people off. And how do you deal with that? How do you keep the team motivated? It's something that's pretty difficult. So yeah, those are things that I do, but I definitely don't have it all figured out. I don't think anyone does, but yeah, that's kind of what I do.
You know what? The biggest outcomes on the planet in business are founder-led. And it's very important that founders have peak mental performance. If you take care of yourself personally, you'll be able to take care of the business. And I'm glad you've ended on a great note here, sharing some personal ways, whether that's relying on community effectively, right? Relying on people to talk through things and sort of have this community therapy session, to using workouts and exercise as a way to blow some steam off, right? And building that support network, I think is key. Eating right. Some of the things you've shared is very, very helpful. And one of the most important things is this power of now. All you have is now. Yes, you can have big goals, but tomorrow may not come, right?
Yeah.
I was running. We raised this money, and then I had COVID. I was hospitalized and I was afraid for my life. And I said, if I could go back in time, I would spend more time with my family. That's why I'm in Dubai. I get more time with them right now, right? With the time zone and everything else. Because, living in the moment is very important. It's very important to stop, to smell the roses versus just walking by, because you may not get that chance tomorrow. Yeah. And being grateful is huge. Somebody else always has it worse than you, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
What a great pleasure, man. I love it. We're very similar in many ways. We have very similar sort of ethos and how we built the businesses. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to end on that note of, if you build a community, you won't become a commodity. You're doing a great job. You're changing lives. You're not just focused on printing money. You're changing lives, and wishing you great success, my man.
Thanks, Lloyd. I'm a huge fan of the podcast, huge fan of Traction. As you know, I've been kind of part of the Traction community for a long time myself. So it's a pleasure to be here on the podcast myself. I've listened to a lot of episodes, so it's really cool to be on. Hopefully we'll keep in touch, and I'd love to visit you in Dubai one day.
Definitely, man. Take care.
Cheers.
I need some traction.